5 Live Formula One.
Formula One lands back in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, for the 20th race this season and the last of the sprint races for 2023. And today is Sprint Saturday. Ahead of us, the sprint shootout, which sets the grid for this afternoon's sprint race. We qualified yesterday for the Grand Prix on Sunday, so that is all done and dusted. And ahead of us, we will soon be getting into some more qualifying action. Alongside myself, Harry Benjamin, calling all the action, is a multiple W Series race winner, Alice Powell, and the BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson, also joins us in the commentary box. And Alice, I think we have to go back to yesterday, first of all. In qualifying for the Grand Prix, at the end of Q1, the top 20 were within a second of each other. But then in Q3, the heavens opened and it all mixed up. Verstappen was the one who got out at the right time to set pole position.
Yeah. He did it again, didn't he? A Red Bull, a combination of both of them, got out at that perfect time. I mean, totally different conditions today. The weather is sunny, it's warm, it's 24.8 degrees, so it is actually cooler than what it was yesterday during that weird Q3. And actually the drivers said it was the most bizarre session they'd ever experienced. Max was on the radio at the end saying, that feels awful, there's no grip in this tyre whatsoever. And his engineer was like, everyone is complaining, everyone is saying the same. And I think that's what really hurt Lando Norris. And I'm surprised that McLaren, or even Lando really, didn't say, right, okay, I need to get out, because they just needed to look outside. I think Alonso said it's night, didn't he, over the radio? It was that dark outside. So you know that the rain is coming, the track will start that you'll lose the light, the temperature will drop, and you'll lose the grip in the tyre, and that's what happened. But what a greater scale it seemed, because the drivers were just said it was so bizarre. But as I said, totally different conditions today.
I mean, that was the big what could have been from yesterday for Lando Norris and McLaren. It definitely seemed like he was the man that could maybe challenge for pole position. And Verstappen, Red Bull and Perez, actually, who has looked a little closer to Verstappen so far this weekend, didn't look like the out-and-out fastest from the get-go in practice right at the start of the weekend. So it is tight. Ferrari were 1 and 2 in practice, of course. So that's what the sprint weekend does give us. If we're looking for some positives, well, it doesn't give us much in terms of learnings. We don't know what's going to happen. It's not straightforward. But the white puffy clouds are up in the sky, interspersed between the blue sky. It's a much clearer day as well. Air temperature 25 degrees, track temperature 46 degrees, and the risk of rain for this sprint shootout is 0%. This is a fantastic track as well that is loved by drivers, teams and fans as well. It's an old school track, Interlagos, one of the shortest on the calendar, just over 4.3 kilometres, 2.6 miles, 15 turns, 5 to the right and 10 to the left. It's quite bumpy as well, Alice, that we've seen out there as well. So that could catch some of the drivers out, given the limited running we've had compared to a normal weekend.
Yeah, it certainly could. Ferrari even said yesterday, didn't they, that they've gone safe with the ride tyre. Obviously, Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton got excluded for wear at the Austin Grand Prix. So they've even said that they've gone safe. So they're running a little bit higher than they would, just to play it safe, because they seem to have the pace here today. But yeah, it's bumpy and drivers, and we saw, didn't we, some slow-mos from our end of cars just not looking great, not looking comfortable. So I would say that actually, comparing to Austin, it's not as bumpy, but it's certainly bumpy.
This is how sprint shootout works if you're a little bit unfamiliar with it. We still have 3 segments to the qualifying: SQ1, SQ2 and SQ3. SQ1 is 12 minutes, SQ2 10 minutes and SQ3 is 8 minutes. And the teams are free to use any of their available tyres in regular qualifying, but in the sprint shootout, new sets of medium tyres are mandatory in SQ1 and SQ2. And then in the final stage of the shootout in SQ3, drivers must run the soft tyre, but they don't have to be a new set. So that is how it stands in terms of the format for the sprint shootout. Over in the drivers and constructors points, to bring you up to speed with that, it is of course Max Verstappen, who has already claimed the title, sits on top with 491 points. That is over 250 clear of his teammate Sergio Perez, who lies in second, and that is one of the big fights we are watching towards the end of this season. Can Perez hold on to not just second second place in the standings, but in that Red Bull seat as well. He's on 240 points. 20 separate him and Lewis Hamilton in third, who is hunting him down. Carlos Sainz Jr. is now up into fourth in front of Fernando Alonso. That's the top five. And then in the constructors, it's Red Bull, who have already clinched the title. They're on 731 points. That's nearly double what Mercedes had. They're in second. Ferrari is third. McLaren fourth. Aston Martin fifth. Alpine, Williams are in seventh. And then AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo and Haas in what is heating up to be quite a nice battle at the back of the grid as well. It may only be for seventh, but it's worth tens of millions for those teams. That's how it all stands at the moment. Shootout one is underway. 11 minutes and 20 seconds already on the clock and counting down. The grandstands are filling up, and I think the fans will be much happier that they are not having to get the cagoules out and run for cover. But Alice, people aren't going out quickly as Verstappen puts that to bed and immediately heads out.
Yeah, they're heading out. The track's not going to be great. There has been a support race out previous, but we saw this yesterday, didn't we, actually, in the only free practice session that we had, that the drivers reporting of a lot of debris, a lot of stones. That is then the reason why qualifying was delayed by 15 minutes. And they had to get the sweepers out. The marshals were out doing a great job as always, but they were out sweeping the track. And I promise, and from experience, when you do have stones or any piece of debris sort of hit your hands, I think Alonso said it was horrible on his hands, and I can vouch for that. And they go much faster speeds than I've been in a single seater, so it's not ideal for the drivers. So that's probably why some of them have thought, don't need to rush out, but someone's got to go first. And Max Verstappen, well, he's usually first in a lot of the sessions, isn't he? So why not be first out the pit lane this afternoon? Well,
and it paid off for him yesterday with a pole position as well. If he'd come out a few seconds, a minute later, and he would have been caught out by the sudden change in climactic conditions, to quote race control, when suddenly the clouds darkened. It was nearly pitch black. It almost became like a night race. Couldn't be more different to what we're experiencing now. The sun is out and it is clear as day, and Verstappen is winding up for his first fast lap in this SQ1 session. Perez followed him out as well at the pit lane, and pretty much everybody coming out now. The two Alpines, the two Williamses, then the two Ferraris, all heading out on that medium compound of tyre. New mediums for everybody who has headed out so far. Now, it is a different type of condition, but Alice, who are you watching further back in the pack? Who do you think could be a standout? Because yesterday, Lance Stroll getting up into third on the grid. Yes, right place, right time on the track, but that Aston Martin has looked better of it in terms of raw speed this weekend than it has done over the last couple of races.
It has, but would I say, well, Lance Stroll, he did a great job yesterday. Aston Martin, by the way, were the first down the end of that pit lane, or one of the first, so they got really good track position and circuit conditions yesterday in that final piece of qualifying, so they were able to put it together and get up. Lance did a great job. We have to give him credit. It wasn't just because of his track position. He did a great job of putting his car there in P3. Would I say they're in a shout for the top five? Alonso, maybe. We saw flashes of pace from him yesterday, but with the higher track temperature, we've got 46.1 degrees at the moment. Mercedes sort of struggled with their tyre warm-up yesterday, they said, in when the temperatures dropped in that last qualifying session. So you would think that won't be a huge issue today, and actually just watching the temperature is already going up. So you would say that if they will be higher than where they were yesterday in Q3. Ferraris, watching out for them. And Albon, he did a really good job in free practice, but just really struggled yesterday in qualifying. So keep an eye out for him as well, to see if he's might have had a slight issue or made a mistake on his lap. We don't really know. He said he didn't quite put it together, so we'll see if he can put it together today.
The sound you're hearing is Charles Leclerc. He's just cut the beam to set his first lap time. He's gone second with a 1:12.1 behind Max Verstappen, who on that opening run set the fastest lap, a 1:11.8, but he's just been knocked down to second because Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari is now top. It's Sainz, Verstappen, Leclerc, but this is the sound of Lewis Hamilton, who comes across the line and just over half a tenth of a second split him and Sainz P1, Hamilton in second, Verstappen third, Russell fourth, Leclerc fifth, Perez sixth, then Gasly, Ocon, Albon, the 9 times set so far as the cheers erupt from the grandstand. All sorts of fans out there, Ferrari, Mercedes, all screaming for delight when they see their driver out on track. And Fernando Alonso will be the next car to cut across the beam as he winds up for his first proper fast lap in that Aston Martin into the braking zone of turns 1 and 2 as you plunge down into the centre S's. It brings you out round the long left-hander of turn 3 and then onto the Retta Oposta, the long straight down towards turn 4. DRS is open, the drag reduction system, the rear wing slots open and then shuts immediately under braking, and Alonso is about a 10th off of Carlos Sainz in sector 1.
Yeah, we saw this yesterday. Those that waited a little bit longer weren't the first to go out and set a lap time, especially in Q1 and Q2, ended up being the faster towards the end. So times are coming down. Fastest at the moment, as you said, Harry, is Carlos Sainz on a 1:11.796. Yesterday, Q3, even though it was those sort of tricky conditions with the weather coming in and on the soft tyre, it was a 1:10.7. So there's still plenty of pace to come from this track, and it will evolve. It will evolve quickly. It will, even though we've only got 5 minutes and 40 seconds left of this session, I will expect this order to certainly change.
Sound of Fernando Alonso coming across the line in his Aston Martin. He goes 7th fastest with a 1:12.2. But the one we are watching is Lando Norris. What could have been for the British racer for McLaren in yesterday's Grand Prix qualifying had he not been caught out by the change of weather conditions. He comes across the line to set his first lap time in this SQ1 session and he goes 5th fastest. Almost 3/10 off of Carlos Sainz as it currently stands. Let's see how it continues to go. Opening runs then being made. Magnussen, decent lap from the Haas driver. He gets up into the top 5 with 5 minutes to go. A reminder, it is still like normal qualifying. The bottom 5 will be eliminated as the other McLaren of Oscar Piastri has a little moment coming out of the exit of the centre S's. Slight bit of correction for the Aussie as he gets on his way. He has also been looking quick as well in the sister McLaren.
Yeah, and that's the sound of Max Verstappen. Let's hear from him.
What is Checo doing? He just to tell me if he goes for a lap, I don't know.
Max, that was not expected.
Okay, so that was Gianpiero Lambiase replying to Max Verstappen. So this was coming into turn 12. Verstappen's going slow on the inside, and then Perez sweeping around the outside much faster. And Verstappen has to dart a little bit closer to the grass, the inside, to make sure he's out of the way of Perez. But Red Bull saying they weren't expecting Perez to go for another faster lap. Perez is currently down in 10th, 4/10 off of Carlos Sainz at the moment, who is the fastest driver with 4 minutes left on the clock as Piastri winds up for another lap after the mistake he made on his last one coming through the centre S's. In the elimination zone at the moment, all laps have been completed, and this opening gambit is Stroll, Joe, Albon, Tsunoda and Sargent. The bottom 5, the slowest 5 drivers, will be eliminated in the next 3.5 minutes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Sergio obviously felt that he still had more pace. Actually, he's boxed, so that doesn't quite make much sense. Clearly wanted to. He thought it was a race to the pits. Max is still out there at the moment, but that's another. Sergio's another one that lost out yesterday, didn't he? With Piastri spinning, going off the second to last corner.
I've got something stuck on the left front wheel deflector.
Copy.
Okay, so that could be a number of things, especially with the high winds we saw yesterday. But Sergio actually felt that he had the pace to be on the front row of the grid yesterday. So at the moment, that's not necessarily looking that way for now. But as I said, the track will evolve. Maybe it will come to him, and he'll move further up from where he's sitting in 10th place at the moment.
That was Kevin Magnussen we heard on the radio just a few moments ago, complaining about something being stuck in the side in the left deflector. I think he said it was. But Magnussen has done a great opening lap, it must be said, to get it to the top 5. Hulkenberg, his teammate, also up there in 8th as well, and usually it's Hulkenberg who has the upper hand when it comes to qualifyings, and no matter what the case is in traditional Grand Prix qualifying, Hulkenberg is the favoured driver. 13 in his favour. Only 6 times has Kevin Magnussen out-qualified his teammates so far. 2 minutes and 13 seconds left to go then in this first session for the sprint shootout, where we will eliminate the 5 slowest drivers, 16th downwards, and as it currently stands, that would be Lance Stroll, Zhou Guanyu, Alex Albon, Yuki Tsunoda and Logan Sargent. But second runs then happening now, and Charles Leclerc heads down through the centre S's to try and improve his lap time. He's currently down in 7th place with a 1:12.1 as he makes his way down towards turn 4 and up through the gears before he then slams on the brake just after the 100-metre board, turns into the left, runs over the curb slightly, carries the speed and momentum through 5 and then towards the short run that then brings you round the double right-hander of turn 6 and 7. Then a slightly tricky braking zone of turn 8. The last thing you want to do is catch any traffic here, isn't it, Alice?
Yeah, and there was a little bit of traffic on the inside that kindly moved out of the way. It was all looking fairly smooth at the moment for Carlos Sainz, and he actually looked a little bit smoother yesterday than Charles Leclerc, a little bit more comfortable with the Ferrari that he's got underneath him now as he sweeps through turn 11 into 12, which is where Oscar Piastri span off yesterday during qualifying, and then it's full throttle all the way up the hill, and it's not until you reach the very last kink before the straight where you'll get the aid of the DRS, and he's going to storm across the line, and no improvement.
There's a couple of drivers. Piastri couldn't improve in the last couple of sectors either. There's the yellow flag out in sector 1. Tsunoda does find time. He gets himself and his AlphaTauri up into 15. Norris finds time and gets up into 2nd, and that's the reason for the yellow flag. There is an Alpine of Esteban Ocon that has hit the wall, and with 33 seconds left on the clock, that has brought out a red flag. The Alpine and the rear of that car covered in some advertising hoardings. Ocon says he is okay on the radio, but just in the final moments of qualifying, we were about to see what the pace is, and Alonso carrying a puncture, front left, scraping along the floor for Fernando Alonso as smoke and sparks fly from the underneath of that Aston Martin. Has there been any kind of contact then between Alonso and Ocon, former teammates? Ocon is still inside his car as he starts to slowly remove the steering wheel and his gloves and make his way out of the cockpit, but that is not good news for Ocon, who was down in 16th, and Alonso, who was a little bit further ahead in 11th, but Ocon then clambers out of his car, and that is day done for his sprint shootout and day done for everybody in SQ1. It will not be resumed.
No, and that has really hurt Lance Stroll, who was sitting in P3 for the Grand Prix, or will be sitting P3 on the grid for qualifying for tomorrow's race. He's out, but that's a big hit for the Alpine. I mean, I can't imagine that there's contact there.
The whole rear end
is in a bit of a mess, so he's had a hefty hit, and that's probably why he's getting out slowly. He's clearly gone in backwards because there's no damage on the front, so we are now hearing Fernando Alonso, who moves out of the way.
Oh, it was contact. Alonso was coming out of the centre S's, and then through the left-hander of turn 3, is moving towards the outside in an attempt to get out of the way of Esteban Ocon's Alpine, who is on a fast lap, comes steaming down the centre S's. Clear view of Fernando Alonso to his right, and then there was a gap, but Ocon had a snap of oversteer.
Okay, you okay?
The correction...
Idiot, Fernando.
You okay?
Yeah.
Okay, mate.
I think that was just unfortunate for Ocon. He got on the curb, snap on the steering wheel, and in that correction, hits Alonso.
Well, there wouldn't have been a crash if Alonso wasn't there. He would have just got a swapper on and carried on. Alonso had every right to be there. Alonso was off the racing line, so I totally agree. It's just unfortunate that they happened to be there, and if Esteban didn't get the swapper on, he would have carried on and then safely made it past Fernando Alonso. So, I mean, in heat of the moment, of course, he's going to blame Fernando, but I'm sure if he watches it back, he will say, well, yeah, it's just unfortunate that Alonso happened to be there, because Alonso left enough room for a car to go past. He just wasn't able to leave enough room for a car to have a swapper and have to make a correction. So very unfortunate incident, unfortunately, there for both of them. Hopefully that means that the car for Alonso is okay, because that was a horrible hit to the front of Fernando, and we obviously saw him crawling around, didn't we, with the puncture. But yeah, the Aston Martin mechanics will be on it like a swarm of flies.
Out at the end then of SQ1, Ocon, Stroll, Joe, Albon and Sargent will not progress, and they will start 16th all the way down to 20th position for the sprint race later on this afternoon, as the clean-up job commences for Esteban Ocon's Alpine. The start of SQ2 has been delayed while that continues, and the digger truck is already there that lifts the Alpine up off the ground, and the rear wing of Ocon's car is just completely disintegrated. The right rear tyre is gone. The left rear has taken a pounding as well, as has the tyre barrier on the outside of turn 3. As the Aston Martin mechanics back in the garage now begin damage assessment.
I think there is a little bit of damage there. The mechanic was sort of waving and pointing at the caked in there, so there looks like they're taking off possibly the caked in to have a look at the fragile parts underneath that caked in that do effectively protect the brakes there. Fernando isn't in the car, so he's got out. I hope that his hand's all right, because that was a nasty flick, and we've seen incidents, haven't we? Daniel Ricciardo, for example, but not that Alonso could have taken his hand off the wheel at any moment there. But looking at that replay again, Harry,
what could have been the causes for that?
Well, he ran slightly wide, didn't he, Esteban? Carried probably a little bit too much speed through 2, which bleeds into 3. And we had a lot of rain, didn't we, yesterday? There's been 1, 2 maybe support races, if that. So there could have just been a little bit of water still in the divots of the curb, or even still the grass being slightly damp. So he's obviously run wide. The car, his Alpine car, has not quite liked it. He's got a bit sideways, and I think it's just unfortunate. I'll be amazed if anyone gets a penalty for that.
It has been noted by race control. I wonder if wind may have played a factor perhaps as well. We saw it got very windy yesterday. A sudden gust of wind can easily knock the stability of your car.
Yeah, I mean, it's not too gusty at the moment. Wind speeds are fairly calm, fairly chill. But that certainly, if it was a bit higher, could be an option, because we saw that yesterday, didn't we? So we are just getting a little look, and we're on board with Fernando. So he's having a look. He jinks out of the way. He does actually turn left and go slightly back on the racing line.
Yeah, we crashed.
Okay, mate. You okay?
Yeah, but yeah, a lot of damage, I guess. Yeah. He went into me, I think.
BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson was watching that closely. What did you make of it, Andrew?
So Alonso, you can see as he's coming through turns 1 and 2, the centre S, he's looking in his mirrors, left and right, because he's obviously been warned that there's a car behind him, which is Ocon. He moves off the racing line to the right through turn 3, and the only reason there's a collision is because Ocon has a snap. He runs wide and he hits the Aston Martin. It's as simple as that. I don't know why he thinks Alonso's an idiot for trying to get out of the way, and then him losing control of his car.
The Haas screwed me, middle sector. He can't sit there. What's he doing?
That's Logan Sargent, who was on his final fast lap, and as he was coming into turn 8, Haas was on his inside, which I think did affect Sargent. He ran quite deep into 8, but there was room.
The only reason that has affected him is he's got distracted by the car there. There was no way that he was on the racing line. He wasn't anywhere near the line that at least Sargent shouldn't be taking, normally around that corner. So that is just... I've probably pulled that excuse a few times.
Well, it's the same reason why Ocon was saying Alonso was an idiot, right? You say it in the heat at the moment.
He's making it an excuse for his poor lap time.
If Ocon's car was where Ocon's car was meant to be, he wouldn't have hit the Aston Martin. It's as simple as that.
He got a snap did Ocon, and if that hadn't happened, the crash would not have happened. There was space for both cars to make their way safely through the corner. I'm sure they'll have a look at that as and when the stewards have noted that incident, as I say, and that has meant SQ1 is done and dusted. SQ2 will be getting underway shortly. Slight delay while they clean up that session. A couple of incidents involving Russell, Norris, Piastri and Ocon will be investigated after the session. That's failing to follow the race direction instructions. That's the maximum delta time. So this all harks back, Alice, doesn't it, to finding a gap on track, doesn't it, but not going too slowly.
Yeah, we've seen this lots of times over several races, especially recently. And nothing ever really gets done about it, does it, to be honest? So I'll be amazed if much gets done. But there was penalties yesterday, wasn't there, Harry, that will change the grid ever so slightly for the Grand Prix tomorrow. George Russell, 2-place penalty, same with Esteban Ocon. So that's, well, his weekend's gone even worse now, hasn't it? And also Pierre Gasly. And that was basically the rule that F1 have put on for this weekend. They're not allowed to stop and queue in the pit lane to get a space. Once you've gone past the pit exit line where you can release the pit limiter, you can stay to the left and you can go at not a crazy slow walking pace, but a decent pace to then allow yourself to get a gap. And basically Russell, he was nearly collected, wasn't he, by Gasly yesterday, because he was sort of hovering in the middle of the road, didn't pull over to the left. And then Gasly clearly didn't learn from what George was doing, because he did then the exact same thing, and so did Esteban Ocon. So those penalties we get, and they've obviously only 2 places, good drop, but 2 places is 2 places. At
the end of then this sprint shootout SQ1 session, just a reminder, everybody from 16th downwards is now unable to take part. They are the slowest. That included Esteban Ocon, the centre of that collision, right at the very end in his Alpine, out of this session. Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin, Joe Guan Yu in the Alfa Romeo, Alex Albon 19th in the Williams, and Logan Sargent 20th in the Williams. What stood out to you pace-wise, Alice, in terms of that session? I was impressed by the 2 Haas times. I thought they both did a great effort, especially Kevin Magnussen on his first run as well, to get up into the top 5, and he ended up in the session 6th. But nice to see a turn of speed for the Haas cars, who on recent race weekends have looked like they've fallen to the bottom of the pack.
Yeah, but they've got some good history here, haven't they? Especially K-Mag.
Well, I think they're the only team to have 2 Brazil Grand Prix, Sao Paulo Grand Prix pole sitters.
Yeah, exactly. So he quite fancies, just gels with this circuit. Some drivers do. So clearly this pairing enjoy driving around this circuit. But taking from that session, of course, Max Verstappen, he didn't get really to set another lap time. Carlos Sainz, I said when we were able to look at his onboard and ride on board with him, he just looks kind of quite calm and chill with the Ferrari beneath him at the moment. And obviously Lando Norris, he's popped up where he probably should have been for qualifying yesterday.
Absolutely. And as we wait for the start of SQ2, the drivers, some of them just sat in their cars waiting calmly, visor up for George Russell and for Daniel Ricciardo as well, looking at some last-minute data as the mechanics surround the AlphaTauri. But they were good laps for Sainz, Norris and Hamilton, who ended that SQ1 session as the fastest 3. And that's one of the stories. I mean, look, Formula One's a hard sell in this closing stages of the 2023 season, let's be honest. But this hasn't looked as clear-cut of a weekend for Max Verstappen and Red Bull. Has it, Andrew?
Well, it's been hard to tell, hasn't it? Because actually, we've not had a lot of consistent running evidence. So the Ferraris were first and second in practice, for example, with Sainz ahead of Leclerc, but they ran the soft tyre and it's only practice. Then in qualifying yesterday, Leclerc was comfortably quicker than Sainz, but then he was running slightly ahead of him on the track when the conditions were changing dramatically, with the clouds coming in, and all the drivers said they'd never experienced a qualifying session anything like that, with the conditions changing so quickly. It was like, it felt like to them like it was wet when it wasn't actually raining. And then, Norris thought he was quick enough to be on pole, but we don't actually know what he did wrong other than ran late on that lap, and now this morning you look at the 2 Ferrari drivers, they've completely changed position. Leclerc nearly 4 tenths slower than Sainz, down in 7th place. And then in that session before the sort of dramatic ending between Ocon and Alonso, drivers got a second lap in and went faster, like Norris, but Sainz, Hamilton, Verstappen, Russell, Leclerc, Alonso, none of them improved on their second laps. So I think it's kind of weird. It's a really hard weekend to call at this stage. What I would say is that by the end of qualifying yesterday, Verstappen and Leclerc went out pretty much line astern, and they ended up in the positions you might expect of those two drivers if they'd gone out in the same conditions at the same time. Everybody else, we're not quite sure about, and actually the gap between Verstappen and Leclerc today is about what it was yesterday in qualifying. It's just that instead of being first and second, they're fourth and seventh at the moment.
Yeah, well, it's close anyway as well. I mean, the top 20 at the end of that SQ1 session split by 0.8 of a second. Yesterday, what were we? 0.9 of a second, I think, the top 20 come the end of Q1. So certainly in terms of one lap pace, it's tight between the 20 drivers around this Interlagos circuit. But of course, around shorter circuits, that's going to happen, isn't it?
That's natural, and you'll always get that. We should expect to see them dive into the 110s, certainly by the end of SQ3. I'd expect them to be within those 110s. So, but yeah, you naturally do, and that's what we'll continue to see sort of throughout the weekend. And it's a nature of this track. There's no sort of hard stopping corners as well. It's quite, I wouldn't say it's fast flowing like Qatar, but it's got a more sort of medium speed feel to it. Whereas if there was some really heavy braking zones and some bigger hairpins and some bigger stops, the gap might be slightly bigger.
Just one thing to be aware of as we go through qualifying is that Perez and Piastri don't have a set of new soft tyres left. So if they get to Q3, which is looking marginal at the moment because Piastri's 14th and Perez only 10th, then they're going to be really on the back foot. They haven't got a chance, basically, of being at the front because everybody else has got at least one set of new soft tyres.
That was the voice of the BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson, alongside multiple W Series race winner Alice Powell and myself, Harry Benjamin. We've just finished SQ1 for the sprint shootout to set the grid for the sprint race later on this evening, and it came to an abrupt end due to a collision involving the Alpine of Esteban Ocon and the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso as they come through turns 2 and then the left-hander of turn 3. Ocon on a fast lap and Alonso on a slow lap. Getting out of the way was Alonso, round the outside of the corner, and Ocon taking to the inside but got on the curb, had a snap on the rear, and that snap has led to the two of them making contact and Ocon coming off worse into the barrier, and that whole rear end of the Alpine destroyed.
So Alonso's in the garage looking pretty rueful and fed up at the moment. I think he suspects his car might not be ready for the second part of qualifying. Just looking at that replay again, Alice was right. There is a slight move. Alonso's quite a long way over to the right-hand side of the circuit, certainly beyond, he's not right at the edge, but he's beyond the sort of middle point. He does move he does start to turn very slightly to the left a bit, but then he has got to go left because the corner is going left. But when you see when you see it from his onboard camera, it looks like that might have had an influence on Ocon hitting him. But then it's very clear from Ocon's onboard camera if Alonso had or hadn't made that slight move to the left, Ocon was still going to clatter into him because he was on such a wild trajectory, having had that snap one way, snap the other way, correcting it, sliding across the track. He was basically going on a diagonal course directly into the Aston Martin, whatever happened.
Yeah, no, exactly. And people might say that, okay, well, Alonso should stay even further wide if the accident was going to happen anyway, but Alonso probably turned slightly more left because it is dusty offline. We saw, didn't we, yesterday, people moving out the way and the plumes of dust that were being kicked up from the drivers. And if you want to keep your tyres clean, you want to keep them fresh, then you can't go stray too far offline. He left him plenty of room to get through. As Andrew said, the only reason why that crash happened was because Esteban got that swapper on. But a few drivers, Harry, are looking to get out of the car and maybe stretch their legs a little bit. George Russell, one of the tall ones, I can imagine that's what you'd be doing if you were sat in there in the F1 car at the moment.
I was sat in an F1 car, I don't think I'd ever get in one. I don't think they're letting anybody above 6 foot getting in an F1 car, certainly 6'1". But you're right, Russell was making a move to get out of the cockpit. The camera shot cut away, so we didn't quite see the end result, but they certainly moved the headrest out. We haven't had a signal from the stewards or race control yet to see when SQ2 will get underway. My logical reasoning of it would be that they're still making some repairs to the barrier that the Alpine of Esteban Ocon hit on the exit of turn from the outside of turn 3 during that collision. But that incident, as we've been discussing, will be investigated after the session. So everybody back in their garages at the moment and waiting for the green light to come on so we can get the second part of this sprint shootout underway. No threat of any rain upsetting things as it did yesterday either. It's fair weather in Sao Paulo, and there may not be any Formula 1 action on the track right now, but not too far away from the Interlagos circuit. There's a lot of football being played in a country that is synonymous for its footballing success, but also synonymous for its Brazilian racing drivers as well. Just some of the winners who have won around this prestigious circuit: Fittipaldi, Piquet, Senna, Felipe Massa, the most in recent years. And it's a shame we don't really have any Brazilian drivers on the grid at the moment. There are a couple of reserves. Felipe Drugovich, the F2 champion from last year, has just been announced that he's signed on for another season at Aston Martin as their test and reserve driver. Pietro Fittipaldi, who is the reserve down at Haas, did get a couple of runs in that Haas a few years ago, replacing Romain Grosjean after that huge shunt he had in Bahrain back in 2020. But he's just been confirmed in a race seat for IndyCar in America next year. So whether he is able to dovetail that campaign and a Formula 1 campaign as well as reserve, we wait to see. Gunther Steiner, the team principal, saying they would love to have him involved still. But it's a shame we don't really have any Brazilian representatives, but that doesn't seem to affect the crowd attendance. They love them all, and I suppose they have got an honorary citizen in the form of Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, they certainly have. The atmosphere, always electric at the Brazilian Grand Prix. The passion that the fans and a lot of the drivers say, it's just hugely passionate. As you can still hear, many of them in all different kinds of kit, and that's always nice to see. We've got some Brazilian football fans, we've got Papaya fans, Aston Martin, Mercedes, a whole wide range of fans, and still proud of their Ayrton Senna as well, as a huge Ayrton Senna flag is being strewed across the grandstand. Feel sorry for those that are underneath. It kind of ruins the view for everyone underneath. Luckily there's no on-track action for them to have a look at the moment. But certainly a very, very passionate nation and competitive nation of that as well. Well, we are still awaiting for the second part of the sprint shootout to commence. But while we do, well, it was a brilliant day yesterday for the Canadian Lance Stroll, and his Aston Martin will start third for the Grand Prix, but knocked out in this first session for the sprint shootout. He will start 17th at best in the sprint later on today, and we can hear from him now.
Lance, what a change in events from yesterday, P3. Obviously not with the same pace today. Walk us through the session.
Yeah, just a lot of traffic on my push lap. So around here, yeah, you can't afford to be passing 3-4 cars on your push lap. So that cost us a lot today. Obviously, conditions quite a bit different today from yesterday. Did the car feel like it had similar pace? And I think the car was all right. I mean, I think we were too bad. I think it was just a lot of traffic out there, and short session, everyone trying to do laps. So I did my first push, and then second push I was a few tenths up. I picked up a lot of traffic from turn 7 pretty much all the way to the end of the lap, and you're just losing tons of downforce in that middle sector in traffic. So yeah. Hopefully the race goes a bit smoother. Best of luck.
James Hinchcliffe asking the questions there to Lance Stroll, eliminated from SQ1. He actually sounded a bit more upbeat than yesterday when he qualified third for the Grand Prix in that interview. Yeah, he looked, miserable is one way to describe it yesterday after qualifying third, but he sounds, bizarrely, a little bit more upbeat, even though he's down in 17th place. But, there we go. Whatever floats your boat. Maybe he prefers to be down that end of the grid. Who knows? But yes, we're still waiting
here, Harry? Because it was a big impact, wasn't it, into that tyre barrier?
Yeah, it's barrier repairs. That is the reasoning for the longer delay. And I suppose that longer delay is helping the likes of Fernando Alonso and his Aston Martin team, who was involved in that incident with Ocon, taking a big hit to the front left. And there's some spectacular, frantic scenes going down on the Alonso side of the Aston Martin garage. There's a mechanic who is head first in the cockpit with his legs strung over the halo, facing out towards the front wing, and a cacophony, a symphony of mechanics furiously working hard on all four corners of that Aston Martin car as they use this period to try and see if they can get that car ready to go again for SQ2. And I suppose it's been a busy, and not in a good way, build up to this weekend for Fernando Alonso and that Aston Martin team, having to fend off lots of rumours in the build up to this weekend about Alonso potentially going and replacing Sergio Perez next year at Red Bull. That has been denied, or somewhat denied, by the Alonso camp and Aston Martin. But this is Formula One, Alice. Anything can happen, right?
And when Red Bull are involved, I feel like, yeah, anything can happen. But yeah, Fernando was certainly very angered by the rumours. There's rumours that float about all the time, but he certainly was pretty annoyed at what was said. A journalist made the tweet, but Alonso said that he'll make sure there are consequences, whatever they might be. Maybe Andrew can enlighten us.
Well, the weirdest thing was that the tweet that everyone thinks sparked it didn't actually say anything. It was a guy called Albert Fabregat, who works for DAZN in Spain. He used to be a mechanic, actually, at Minardi. You can find a video of him on YouTube being involved in a pit stop with Anthony Davison, where the mechanics don't know he's coming into the pits and they're all waiting in the garage. He's sitting outside. Anyway, it's a bit less grey hair on Albert than there is now. But he's a lovely guy. He's very well respected in the paddock. But he put out this tweet after Mexico where he basically said, "I don't want to believe this rumour that I've heard in the paddock tonight. No." And the world went mad. 11 million views on that tweet that said nothing. And everybody assumed he was talking about Alonso going to Red Bull, presumably because Albert's Spanish and Alonso's Spanish and Perez speaks Spanish. Anyway, and it just developed a life of its own. And some people, not sort of mainline Formula One journalists, but some websites started to write about this as if it was a thing, Alonso going to Red Bull in place of Perez. And before you knew it, it developed its own momentum. And that's what led to Alonso's remarks on Thursday in his news conference, where he said it was not funny. And as you say, there would be consequences. And actually, later that day, Albert Fabregat put out another tweet saying, I didn't mean to, cause any confusion or something with my tweet.
Felt the wrath of Fernando Alonso.
So I suspect that Alonso had a word, exactly. And I wouldn't want to be. I know Fernando Alonso quite well, and he's always been very nice to me. But I wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of him. Let's put it that way.
Just put out a random tweet.
Let's test that theory now.
Say,
shall we?
I believe the rumours.
Just so you know, the session's going to restart in a few minutes' time, 11:40 local time. Just on this, Andrew. I mean, you've been involved in Formula One for a long time. You've seen a lot of things. Has there ever been, throughout your entire career in Formula One so far, a rumour that you've thought is so preposterous could never come true, but then did actually happen?
So the interesting thing about this, I don't want to go into too much detail about this because we are about to see some cars go around in circles to compete for fastest lap times, but the most important thing to learn about Formula One as a journalist is don't assume that you know, because anything can happen. Formula One is a crazy world. And the time I learnt that was quite early in my career when I broke a big story back in the mid-90s, and a load of much more experienced people, it was my first year in Formula One, and a lot more experienced people than me dismissed it as nonsense. I won't go into any more detail than that because I don't think some people behaved that well during that period. But they all ended up with egg on their faces, and I didn't. Fortunately, I was a bit touch and go for a while. I was a bit nervous for a couple of weeks, but anyway. So you've got to be careful. You just can't assume that something's not true just because it sounds mad. On the other hand, having said that, you've also then got to think, well, you've then got to do your work and find out whether it is or isn't true. And sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't. So I guess I wouldn't set to answer to it, and that's an indirect way of answering your question. I don't think I've ever seen a rumour that I didn't think was true that then turned out to be true, because I don't think like that, but it certainly happened to other people.
I can't wait for the Andrew Benson tell-all book in 10, 20 years' time. That'll be one to have a look for. Right then, though, good news. You can hear engines firing up as the two Mercedes head out from their garages into the sunlight that this Interlagos pit lane is currently basking in. White puffy clouds in the air, blue skies, and it's the two Red Bulls, Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez, Alice, that once again are first out and eagerly awaiting that red light to turn green.
Yeah, keen beans, aren't they? I mean, we are too. That's a long stoppage we've had there, but finally the track is clear and we can get going. George Russell back in his car after he did get out, and actually his mechanic was had one of the fans that blows into the radiators cooling him down, so he's obviously feeling the heat. Track temperature actually now is up to 50 degrees, and it's 5 degrees warmer than what it was. Air temperature has stayed around 25 degrees, so it's actually not that warm, but obviously George feeling the heat a little bit. And it does get hot when you're sat in the car and there's no air going over, you've got really hot components around you. It does get fairly toasty, so I probably would have been with George actually, hopping out and getting a bit of fresh air. As the sound you can hear now is Lewis Hamilton as he bleezed his way out the pits.
Grandstands packed, fans jumping up and down, eager to see F1 cars back out on this Interlagos track, one of the shortest on the calendar, just over 4.3 kilometres, a little over 2.6 miles, 15 turns, an anti-clockwise track. Rough on the old neck, an anti-clockwise track?
Yeah, there was a circuit that used to be in the UK, Rockingham. I'm sure Andrew would have visited that at times. No, did you ever make your way to Rockingham?
I went to the first IndyCar race at Rockingham, the Shield of Ferron one, by passing Kenny Brack on the last lap. It was an awesome race, but it didn't do a lot for my faith in IndyCar's organisational skills, I can tell you that.
But that was an anti-clockwise circuit, and I remember first going around there in a single-seater, having driven a clockwise circuit and going, ooh, hang on a second, my neck here feels a little bit sore, as Max Verstappen, actually the same place where Esteban Ocon made a mistake and was sent into Fernando Alonso, gets a real twitch through turn 3. But actually, one thing that these drivers, they put in a lot of training and hard work in the gym and on the off-season with their trainers. And you'll find a lot of racing drivers are actually stronger on their opposite sides because they're used to turning, going round clockwise circuits. So one thing that you get, and a lot of trainers are starting to do now with the young people coming through karting, is to try and make sure that you have that balance. So I'm actually stronger on my left-hand side, even though I'm right-handed.
Does that mean you're a witch?
Must be.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been called a lot worse than a witch.
That's a bit of a leap, isn't it, Aaron?
I thought we were friends.
No friends in this business. 7 minutes and 33 seconds remaining of the second part of this sprint shootout. This is the sound of Max Verstappen coming across the line to set his first lap time, and he goes fastest to 1:11.449. It's the only lap time set so far, but Perez is going to make that 2 lap time set as he comes across the line, and he goes fastest of anybody in the final sector, but still a couple of tenths off of his teammate. Perez slots into second. Lewis Hamilton comes through the final corner now, pit lane entry to his left, and he goes third fastest. Everybody out on a medium compound of tyre. Verstappen also reported on the radio, it's got the wind's picked up a bit, it's got a bit gustier around the track as well, and perhaps we'll be seeing a few more snaps and saves from our drivers as they continue these fast laps. Russell puts his Mercedes up into fourth. We're watching Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. Norris in particular has been looking quick all weekend long, might well have been able to challenge for pole position for Sunday's Grand Prix. It didn't quite materialise thanks to the change in conditions. He goes third fastest. Piastri goes quicker across the line in these opening stages. It's Verstappen, Perez, Piastri, Hülkenberg now up into fourth, Norris the top 5, Hamilton and Russell the 7 times set so far, as we look next to the Ferraris and Charles Leclerc, who makes his way up through Junsao.
Yeah, goes through past a little bit of traffic. One of the Red Bulls getting right out of the way. But what I have noticed is they cut the track. They make the line shorter when they come across the line to complete their lap time. Just a shorter distance across the line as Charles Leclerc pops up into P3. But when they do take that line from the off-board pictures we get to see, it's actually really dusty. So it actually looks dustier than when they were doing this in Shootout 1 about, feels like hours ago now. But that's probably why Max reported on the radio, these gusts of wind have sort of created a bit more dust around the circuit. So interesting to keep an eye on that one as well.
Yeah, Sainz goes second, just under a tenth and a half behind Verstappen. Leclerc in fourth, so it's Red Bull, Ferrari, and with 5 minutes and 19 seconds left to go of this second part of the sprint shootout. It's the bottom 5 who will be eliminated. Everybody 11th down to 15th, and at the moment those are the drivers who have yet to set a time. Ricciardo, Alonso, Gasly, Bottas and Tsunoda all in the pits. Pierre Gasly looks like he is about to be sent on his way in that Alpine. He is about to put his visor down. The mechanics are waiting for the signal to release the tyre warmers, covering all 4 wheels before he is sent out into the pit lane. This is the sound of Charles Leclerc coming through the left-hander of 12.
Come on, the Red Bull is not great what he did.
Yeah, we've seen that turns 10, 11.
So that was Leclerc reporting on the radio about the Red Bull being on the inside of him as Leclerc was coming through 11 into 12. I was almost waiting for him to say that. I think that was okay.
I mean, the only reason why he's probably saying that is because he lost a little bit of downforce from the dirty air. So he ran slightly wide on the exit of 11 there, but the Red Bull couldn't have done much different, maybe sped up a little bit round 11. But yeah, I can't see that. I'm not sure which Red Bull that actually was, but can't imagine they're going to be getting a penalty as Charles Leclerc is being weighed. And you can get consequences if you do miss the weighbridge, as we're still waiting for several cars. And I don't think Alonso is going to be going back out. He's apparently back in the hospitality unit talking to some media. So with 3 minutes and 39 seconds left to go, it doesn't look like he'll be making his way out.
No Alonso then, so that might well allow somebody to escape up into that top 10 shootouts. Currently the Hasses still continue to look strong up in 6th and 8th, but we are still awaiting runs from Ricciardo and Tsunoda for AlphaTauri, Gasly in the sole remaining Alpine, and Bottas in the other remaining Alfa Romeo as Bottas is sent out of the pit lane. So are the 2 Mercedes who are going to have another go. Verstappen is out there as well, and it's starting to get a little bit busier. So those towards the back opting for just perhaps one run to try and get their best lap time. And we are setting the grid for the sprint race later this evening. Coverage begins at 6:25 in the evening on 5 Sports Extra, and it will be the last sprint of the season. Lots of talk as well at the moment about Formula One wanting to alter the format once again for the sprint next season. We do believe it's going to make a return. Another 6 races expected to be accompanied with sprints. No confirmation of what they will look like just yet, but for now it is the final one of the year, and this Sao Paulo Grand Prix, the 20th race of the season, will go to Las Vegas in a couple of weeks' time, and then Abu Dhabi for the season finale. And this is actually it's a lot to ask of the teams, of the drivers as well. We're at the end of a long triple header, and then you chuck in a sprint race for good measure as well.
I mean, I don't think it's fair. This was only meant to be a COVID thing for these triple headers, but I think it's really unfair with the teams. You know, they especially those mechanics, they are working on the car all day. And for example, we'll be using a Sunday. They will then have to pack down the garage, and they'll then have to go onto the next flight or back to the hotel in the early hours of the morning. and then they'll do it all again, unpack on a Wednesday, set everything up. It's hard work, and people don't realise the effort that the mechanics and the teams, whether that is the marketing teams that are on track, the social media side, it's really, really hard work, but especially for the mechanics and the drivers as well. You know, race weekends, a lot of adrenaline going through you, and it really can sap the energy out of you, especially, and going through different time zones as well. Okay, we've these races have been on the side, but you know, the Las Vegas to Abu Dhabi, I mean, whoever thought of that? Well, I probably can't say it on air, but silly decision that they made.
I'll tell you how silly it is in Abu Dhabi. I'm not looking forward to that trip at all, I can tell you.
Oh, good luck with that one, Andrew. Right, we're in the closing stages of SQ2, the final push of the season, the final push laps in this second part of the sprint shootout. Bottas on a pretty decent lap in that Alfa Romeo. He seals it off with a 1:11.8. That puts him 7th fastest. That knocks Russell down into 11th. Hamilton on the fringes at the moment. They are both out on the circuit on the medium compounder tyre. Just 13 seconds left of this session remains. Tsunoda cuts the beam. He goes 6th fastest. What can his teammate Daniel Ricciardo do? They're running line astern. Ricciardo will be the next one to come across the line. This is the sound of the Aussie. Back in Formula One, back in that Alpha Tauri, up through the gears. The DRS is open, run to the line. It's 2nd fastest for Daniel Ricciardo, a 1:11.4. Where did that come from? Lovely lap from Ricciardo. Gasly can improve, but only up to 10th spot. He is still at risk. Bottas is now down 11th. He won't get another go at it. He is out of this one. Lando Norris is also down in 12th. Hamilton needs a good lap. So does Russell. Alonso is not taking part in this session. He will be eliminated. This is the sound of Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time champion, to the line. It's enough for 4th fastest. That puts Gasly down into the elimination zone. But what has Russell got? He'll be the next man across the line. The rear wing slides open. DRS activated. To the line for George Russell. It's 5th fastest, just behind his teammate. Russell goes through. But what can Lando Norris do? Fantastic lap. He goes to the top of the timing screens. Norris speeds through into the next part of this sprint shootout. Now, though, we look at the two Ferraris who are finding time. They are currently safe as it stands. Sainz makes his way through, and Leclerc will as well. Magnussen, Hülkenberg, Gasly, Bottas and Alonso will all find themselves heading out of this SQ2 session, and that is where they will start the sprint race for this afternoon. Kevin Magnussen in 11th, out qualifying his teammate Nico Hülkenberg in 12th. Pierre Gasly 13th, Bottas 14th and Alonso 15th with no time on the board.
Yep, and that's disappointing, I would say, from the Hasses, because they were looking pretty competitive, weren't they? As we've spoke about earlier, had good results here in the past, especially those two drivers. But Danny Rick,
the Alpha Tauri's turned up.
Take a bow. He's pulled that lap out from somewhere, hasn't he? And Gasly makes his way into pit lane now, so he'll be very disappointed with that, and not really a good day for Alpine. And you could probably include Aston Martin in that as well.
That is the end then of SQ2. Out go Magnussen, Hülkenberg, Gasly, Bottas and Alonso. And now we will speed through into the top 10 shootout. Let's hear from K-Mag.
Sorry, Kev.
Come on.
I feel the frustration there from Kevin Magnussen, because it's not often he actually has a pretty good qualifying. Not often he's got the pace over his teammate Nico Hülkenberg. Something's clicked for Magnussen, perhaps maybe, with this new concept of car design that Haas brought in Austin, finally understanding what they brought to the table. Yeah,
and it's even more frustrating when it's half a tenth. Not even a blink of an eye's difference there. So big frustration for K-Mag, as you heard there. But Lando Norris is getting wheeled back into the garage, and they're edging towards the 110s now, if they combine the sectors together. So Max Verstappen holds the fastest first sector from them, Perez sector 2, Max again in the final. They would be in the 110s, a 110.9, so it's on its way there, but a good lap there from Lando.
Fantastic, 9 thousandths of a second between Norris and Perez, less than half a tenth between Perez and Verstappen. It's setting up to be quite a tasty top 10 shootout, Andrew Benson.
Is it though?
There it is.
Verstappen didn't do a second lap, and the other two did, and he was a couple of tenths ahead, wasn't he, before that? So I wouldn't get your hopes up just yet for too much competition for him, but I could be wrong. On the Ricciardo performance, it's another great lap, exactly the position he qualified in Mexico a week ago. And it was interesting on race morning. I was hearing from a senior member of another team who was saying that they weren't that surprised by Ricciardo qualifying fourth in the AlphaTauri, because they'd been looking at the AlphaTauri for a while since it's had a load of upgrades on it, and thinking, when are they actually going to do as well as the car can do? When are they going to achieve the car's performance? This person felt that this person's team, I'm not going to name names, so don't ask me, felt that here's Gasly's radio.
Yeah, this was a good lap as well.
He's just willing being 13th fastest.
It's going to be better in the race, it's got to be.
I wouldn't bet on it, Pierre. Anyway, he felt that...
I totally wouldn't want you to be my engineer.
Well, you keep that one offline, wouldn't you? He felt that they'd been underachieving, both team and drivers, and that Ricciardo would finally achieve what they thought that car was possible from it. And also, this person pointed out that actually they track the upgrades that all teams put on their cars through the season, and he said the AlphaTauri is the most upgraded car of the entire field this year. I mean, it needed to be, frankly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Well, and immediately Ricciardo coming in, and along with Tsunoda's good haul as well in Austin, they jumped from last in the constructors up to 8th and are just 12 behind Williams now, and are tied at the moment with Alfa Romeo. So it's a good time for AlphaTauri, who are launching themselves up through the lower half of the field. Let's see where they can qualify for the sprint in just a few moments' time. Incident involving Tsunoda, though, will be investigated, and that is another failing to follow the race directions instruction of a maximum delta time.
do you know what? This keeps happening every qualifying session, and do you know what? Nothing ever comes of it. And
that's what I said.
The FIA makes itself look stupid sometimes. You know, I think when this sort of thing happens and you're constantly putting up warnings about people allegedly breaking the rules, and then nothing happens 4 hours later and you're all hanging on to find out what it is, if it was me running the governing body, I'd be looking at it and going, something's not right here. You know?
Andrew, I would love for you to be running the governing body. Imagine, what's the first thing you'd change?
As president of the FIA.
Oh, you don't have to answer it now. You can have a little bit of think and maybe answer later on later on show. But
I feel like that's a checkered flag podcast special.
ooh,
right
yeah,
there.
we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
We'll
An off-season podcast, I think. That's one for the winter. At the
He's
Christmas
having a good
party.
think, though, I can tell.
Sudden idea.
I'm not going to say. What I can say is some big things are happening at the FIA right now, and I can't say what they are.
Oh, he's got the job. He's got the job. He's in.
Exclusive scoop right here on the BBC's 5 Live F1 coverage. Okay, we're nearly ready. We're just a few seconds away from getting the final parts of the sprint shootout underway. SQ3, the top 10 shootout, to set the grid for the sprint race later this afternoon, and you can hear that in full on 5 Sports Extra. Coverage begins at 6:25 this evening. Right then, 7 minutes and 47 seconds on the clock and counting. Not a huge rush to get out onto the track, but that is not stopping the fans from cheering. The flags are in full force. Ferrari flags, Mercedes caps, hats as well, I think I saw there, all dotted throughout the packed grandstands around this Interlagos track, which has a bit of everything for the drivers.
Yeah, it does, and it's a favourite amongst many. Certainly, I mean, I've never been around it. I've driven it on the F1 game. It's certainly one of my favourite. As the tyres are now being buzzed on to the side or either corner of Yuki Tsunoda. Ferrari are ready and waiting to release Carlos Sainz. He's still got the tyre warmers on his car at the moment, but no one making a rush to go out. Some will probably, and well, they will opt to do just one run. I'll be amazed if many will try and squeeze 2 runs into this. So it's all quiet at the moment with 6 minutes 44 seconds left remaining.
I drove this track once on a proper simulator an F2 driver called Cameron Dass, and I drove his proper full setup simulator, and he just wanted to see how fast I could go around this track, having no racing experience whatsoever behind the wheel of a car. And I was awful. Shocking.
I was waiting for you actually to be like, oh, I was so good. No, I should be a driver.
The hardest part was getting into the simulator. then the second hardest part, height and general size, and downshifting. Some of these corners, and this is my trying to be the racing driver analyst now, especially because they're quite cambered as you plunge down through the centre S's, it's quite hard almost to sort of slow down enough to be able to understand exactly where to get your braking point from. So we are still waiting, though, while we divert away from that story, because I didn't really have an ending for it. I just wanted to say I've driven this track. So there we go. 5.5 minutes left still. Nobody has rushed out on track, so we can only assume then that it's going to be a one run for everybody. And this is setting the grid for the sprint shootout. And a reminder, drivers must run soft tyres in this part of the sprint shootout, but they do not have to be a new set. And we believe Sergio Perez and Oscar Piastri, who are both into this final segment, do not even have a new set of softs available to them. So already on the back foot are Perez and Piastri. But the sun is shining, and there is a bit of tension in the air as we await to see who will emerge first from the grid boxes.
Talking back, actually, you're saying it's difficult with the gears. They're your friends. You can use them out on track, whether you want to try and get the car rotated ever so slightly, struggling a little bit of understeer, use the gears to go down the box slightly later to get that rear to turn. So there you go. Maybe we should go back on the sim and play about with them a little bit.
I think I was only third. I was third on his list of lap times.
Was there only 3 people?
Yes. And also, whenever I play the F1 game, I've got to play automatic gears.
No, you don't.
Yeah,
please.
Can't do it.
Really?
Can't do it. It's hard, Alice.
I'm so disappointed.
It's really hard. I don't have a steering wheel. I'm a remote controller guy, so I think it's harder if you're on a remote control rather than a steering wheel. That's my one defence.
No, I'm still not with it.
I don't think you need to defend yourself. I think genuinely people don't realise
how hard it is.
Exactly the level that is going on out there in Formula One. Most people in the public have got no concept whatsoever of what they're doing in the cars. I would hear comments in the office sometimes. People saying, "Oh, well, they're just why? What do you mean they're fit? They're only just sitting down and driving a car." And I'm like,
That's not like driving to the hate the most.
Yeah, it's not like driving to the supermarket. It's a completely different activity. Anyway,
quite right. Thank you, Andrew, for coming to my defence there.
I mean, there's no defence there with not having gears turned on playing a PlayStation game, or having gears turned on. But there we go.
Right, enough of that. We've got some track action now. 3 minutes. We'll make that 2 minutes and 55 seconds remaining of this sprint shootout. The final part as cars head out on track, and it will be one flyer.
Do you actually get people saying that to you?
Yeah, but why is it so difficult? All you do is just sit there and turn a wheel. Yeah.
I often get in the argument of F1 drivers or drivers in general aren't athletes, are not fit as athletes. And that one always grinds my gears, even when I'm not an athlete.
Death stare and go, I'm not even going to entertain answering that question if you really genuinely think that. But anyway, as you said, we've got cars on track now.
I was about to say, how was your run this morning? And already, straight out of the pit lane, it got a little bit tight between the Ferrari, a Red Bull and an AlphaTauri. It was Verstappen.
Getting blocked here.
Verstappen straight on the radio, getting blocked here. We've already seen penalties dished out, grid penalties dished out for some drivers for blocking the fast lane as you come out of the pit lane. It's Ricciardo in the AlphaTauri, Leclerc in the Ferrari that Verstappen has to squeeze by. He does do it, but it was a bit too tight for anybody to be that comfortable with. But a minute and 45 then Here we go. Oscar Piastri begins a fast lap. Norris as well, out there on softs. Perez is out there. Ricciardo, Leclerc, Hamilton, Sainz, Russell, Tsunoda. They are the 10 drivers who are taking part in this top 10 shootout for the sprint race, which will get going later on today. And Piastri is finding a little bit of traffic in his McLaren. The rookie from Australia did have a blistering first sector, but Verstappen has taken that away. Perez going well too in the middle sector, but at the moment it is all eyes on what can Lando Norris do in the McLaren. He has been looking fast all weekend long. One of the stories of yesterday, could have got pole had the weather conditions not changed. We'll see his teammate come across the line first in Oscar Piastri, who rounds the final corner. He'll head to the DRS line. The rear wing will slide open up into 8th gear, foot all the way down on the throttle, and that is the first opening lap time in SQ3. A 1:11.189 from Piastri, immediately displaced by Lando Norris, who puts down a 1:10.6. But what can Sergio Perez or Max Verstappen do? Verstappen can't beat Norris. It's only enough for second for Verstappen. Right now, Norris is looking in pole position to start the sprint in P1, but Perez is finding time as well in that first sector. This is the sound of Charles Leclerc to the line. It's only enough for third.
Yeah, they're really disappointed, but keep an eye on Perez. He's not matched Norris in that middle sector. He's a 10th down in the mid sector.
Tsunoda's just gone third. That is a brilliant lap from Yuki Tsunoda. Ricciardo can't beat him. He slots up into 5th. But what can Perez do to the line? He can't beat Norris. He can't beat his teammate either. Perez goes up into 3rd place, but he's less than a 10th and a half behind his teammate. Carlos Sainz to the line. It's only enough for 7th. We await now for the 2 Mercedes, who aren't setting the times alike. Hamilton, though, does go up into 4th. Russell is finding time, but no overall bests at the moment. But Russell currently the last driver to come to the line now. Where can he stick that Mercedes as the sparks fly as he runs over the bumps and the banking around the final corner? To the line for George Russell. He out-qualifies his teammate for the sprint. It's 4th fastest for the British racer. But Lando Norris with the fastest lap time, half a 10th between himself and Verstappen, as the roar of applause from the garage and the grandstands for Lando Norris, who will start the sprint race from P1 in front of Verstappen. Perez 3rd, Russell and Hamilton the top 5. An excellent qualifying from Yuki Tsunoda in 6th to beat a Ferrari of Charles Leclerc in 7th. The other AlphaTauri as well, following up in a fantastic 8th for Ricciardo. Sainz is 9th, and Oscar Piastri rounds out the top 10.
That's P1, well done, great job. How we got? Well done, I guess. I don't know, I feel so bad, but so good. Right.
So that's Lando on the radio there, and there's a message behind that, and the message is, yeah, I'm really happy to get pole for the sprint later on today, but what could have been for yesterday? And as I said earlier, he was gutted with not doing the job really in qualifying yesterday. So yeah, he's obviously happy but gutted at the same time, because he knows he could have got pole. He had a good chance to get pole position yesterday.
Well, he gets out of his McLaren, heads straight over to get weighed, as does Max Verstappen. And a good qualifying for the sprint as well for Perez, who continues to have a clean and a better weekend in terms of outright pace, much closer to his teammate than he has been over the last few rounds, as Perez joins the top 3 in getting weighed. Lewis Hamilton in a specially designed helmet with the Brazilian flag embedded on the top, jumps out of his Mercedes, a wave to the crowd, and the huge roar that is greeted for Hamilton's wave. But Norris with a smile, but a wonder. Could this have been pole position for the Grand Prix if it had all gone smoothly yesterday? We'll never know, and that's the way Formula One works. But Norris, then, we will hear from him and what he had to say in just a few moments' time. He's just picking up his cap and making sure he gets the final celebrations in with the team. But at the end of a frantic sprint shootout. Let's hear from the man who will start the sprint race later this afternoon from the P1 position with Naomi Schiff.
Congratulations. You weren't able to make it work yesterday, but today, when all the circumstances came together for you to put it on pole position.
I can't hear anything you're saying, but...
well done.
Yeah, no, a great day. Thank you. A good day. I mean, honestly, it felt like one of the worst laps I've done, so I'm a little bit surprised, but it's a good surprise. I feel like we made up for yesterday, so yeah, good. My first pole in a long time, so I'm happy.
Well, you seem to have really good one-lap pace. We saw that yesterday in some moments. We've seen it again today. But later today, we're going into the sprint race. How do you think that's going to go for you?
No idea. But the pace has been good all weekend. The car's been very strong, so we're on the right track. But it's a tough one. You know, the Red Bulls are always quick. Max is always quick, so it's not going to be an easy race. But the pace is strong, so if we're going to have any chance, I'll give it my all.
Okay, well, we won't have to wait very long. Good luck out there later today.
Thank you.
Lando Norris then speaking to Naomi Schiff after the sprint shootout, where he was the fastest, and he will start the sprint race later today from the P1 position in front of Max Verstappen, Perez third, Russell, Hamilton the top 5, Tsunoda, Leclerc, Ricciardo, Sainz and Piastri the top 10. You can join us for full coverage of the sprint on BBC 5 Live Sports Extra from 6:25 this evening. My thanks to the BBC Chief F1 writer Andrew Benson, to Alice Powell, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin. We will be back for the sprint 6:25 Sports Extra. Join us then. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.